that music was loud. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Bold Moves. I am talking today to Jeff Marinucci. He is the founder of Thought Partner Pro, where he helps advanced entrepreneurs scale their businesses with strategic guidance and operational execution. Unlike typical consultants who deliver reports and leave, Jeff works with his clients in smaller, flexible engagements over time, adapting to shifting business needs while driving long-term success. With over 25 years of experience across industries from healthcare and technology to fitness, art, and cannabis, Jeff has worked with Fortune 50 companies, startups, and everything in between, bringing his expertise, network, and practical insights to ensure breakthrough growth. He is also currently launching Alivivo, which is coming soon. It's a platform that supports wellness practitioners and healers by incorporating the Thought Partner Pro philosophy and structure while connecting them with peers and potential clients in a professional network. Welcome, Jeff, to Bold Moves.
Thanks, Angela. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, Jeff and I have been working together for a number of years. He was actually one of my first brand strategy clients. I don't know if he knows that, but when I was transitioning, from graphic design to brand strategy, he was one of the first and really encouraged me that he loved the process. So it was really encouraging to work with him. So anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about you and your business. So I just read about what you're doing now, but catch us up. So tell me about what you were doing before you started Thought Partner Pro.
Well, I've also had a very interesting journey and an interesting path to where I got to today. I started my career working in a Fortune 50 company at the time, Motorola. And, upon reflection, at different points, I realized that within the company, there's a term now that people use, entrepreneur. It wasn't, I don't think, quite as popular at the time when I was working there, but I found these little pockets within the company where things were, a little bit under the radar. Things were a little bit different. You got a little bit more flexibility, but you still had the safety net of the big company. So it was a great opportunity to kind of start to explore entrepreneurship, but within the context of a larger company where you had a corporate Amex and all of the infrastructure that you had. But I worked in a division that was kind of a small division tucked away to the side, and it actually became $1 billion business within a couple of years of me when I was working there. And I worked on a couple of really interesting projects that had me go to different parts of the world and launch different initiatives that initially seemed like they were going to be really tiny things, but ended up kind of blowing up and taking on a life of their own. And I ended up having a particular interest in emerging markets. So whether it was geographies or specific product lines, I happened to always just work in that field. And so after about 10 years there, I decided I was going to go out and venture on my own. And so I started my own company in the fitness space. And as a startup founder, I experienced all of the ups and downs that you would experience. There were great successes. I did firsts of several things. We had the first and probably only contract where we provided virtual fitness to give students at a university college credit for their activities that they needed to do in order to graduate. So that was a very exciting thing that we did. And then there's the downs where it's like, you're running out of money and are we going to make it? And so, there's that whole roller coaster that you go through. And I ended up joining and being a part of several early and mid-stage growth stage companies over time. In some cases, it was small engagements. In some cases, it was a fractional executive that they needed expertise at the time across a number of different industries. And then about 7 years ago now, I ended up taking a position running a small medical group. And we ended up doubling the business year over year, 4 years in a row. And after that, I said, you know what, I really have enjoyed doing this, but I was getting this pull to do something different. I had a lot of people that kept calling me for advice and saying, hey, I'm working on this company. I'm doing this venture. Like I'm doing this. Can you give me an idea about this? Or can you help me problem solve through this? And I think the company had reached a size where I liked being small and scrappy, and I learned about myself and decided to go back out on my own and do some consulting work. But I didn't want to take the traditional consulting model. I think the consulting model is antiquated and broken. The way that it works is, a consultant comes in, they dig deep into the company, they tell you all the things that are right and wrong, they put it in a report, they send you the big report, and they go on to their next engagement. And I think, especially when you're dealing with small companies, entrepreneurs, either solopreneurs or small teams, the dynamics in that field are constantly changing. And so to hand someone a report today and say, go and implement this, especially when they're dealing with everything that they're dealing with, they might do one or two things on the checklist, but then most of it goes to waste. So the approach that I've taken based on my experience being on the other side of it is, let's go in, let's understand what's going on, let's get a view of the big picture, but then I'll give it to you in little bite-sized pieces over time. So my engagements are not, I come in and do this big, heavy lift and send you a report, but rather I understand the business, we look at how it evolves, and we adjust the steps along the way. So something that I would have valued much more when I was going through, as an entrepreneur as well, to have that in place, as opposed to, people that are always offering to come in and I'll charge you this big amount of money, I'll do this big work for you, hand it off to you, and it's going to be amazing. And the practicality of it doesn't always line up. So, my latest bold move is as I've gone into this field and started working with people, I've had a draw to working with wellness practitioners and healers and people who work in ways of bettering people's lives and helping people feel more alive. So that's where, as Angela said in the beginning, I'm taking the principles of what I do for entrepreneurs across multiple industries and creating an area where I can do this focused on the wellness industry, and at the same time bringing people together and helping people share knowledge and helping people scale what they do, in a field where it's really, really full of these, single solopreneurs, solo practitioners, who are working in this space and finding ways to help them connect.
Yeah. And I think what you mentioned there, I think it's a common thread with entrepreneurs that start their own thing is, you mentioned, you saw a way to do things differently, and you saw a need that you wanted to fulfill and go out on your own, and you wanted to fulfill, because it kind of sounds like you combine consulting and coaching, which is maybe something that's not really so readily available out there, which is great. So I think that's kind of a key element of like, am I ready to be an entrepreneur? Do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? That's kind of one of the things that I find it is a common thread among successful entrepreneurs. It's like that way to think differently. And you talked about connecting dots that maybe haven't been previously connected in that way before. So I think you're really good at that. And you did mention your fitness business that you started initially, the ups and downs. Can you tell me any lessons learned there from the challenges you faced that you now, know better now in your current business? Like anything learned there that you brought with you that was like something to help you, move successfully forward with this new business?
I think there were a lot of, it was full of lessons for sure. One of the
maybe
biggest
some big ones.
Yeah, one of the biggest ones I think for that one was that timing is really important. So I launched an online fitness platform that could do fitness training for individuals, for groups, for teams, and we launched it originally in 2010. And in retrospect, when I look back, if I said, we launched this 10 years later, a decade later in 2020, I'd probably be a billionaire right now, because that happened to be during the height of COVID, and right. Everyone had to be virtual at that point. So there was something there, and I think it was just but we'd already pretty much wound it down by the time COVID hit, and so the concept of timing and understanding the timing, and you can be a little bit ahead of your time, but to kind of test it out and test out the water. So even in what I've been doing, and when I'm coaching, my clients and working with them and helping to strategize, I'm very sensitive about like the timing and what's going on in the market, and understanding competition,
Right.
and understanding just people's receptivity to what's going on. And I think, for me, that was one of the biggest lessons. I think the other thing is like, when you're going with the flow of things, there's a lesson in everything. And when you hit a lot of resistance, like it's really kind of a way for you to have the opportunity to redirect and kind of look across and see what are the other things. And we did that several times, and we had successes at each of those redirects. And I think part of it is just really focusing on scaling and making sure you have enough resources to be able to scale as you do those. And a personal lesson I learned, which I'm even facing now, like I'm kind of a solopreneur again in this phase while I'm doing the work that I'm doing right now, even though I'm working with a lot of different entrepreneurs at the same time, is that it's a very, being an entrepreneur is a very lonely job. And it's, I don't necessarily mean emotionally lonely, but it's, you have to make a lot of decisions on your own. You have to problem solve on your own. You have to execute projects on your own. And even if you have a small team, it's still, it's still a lot of times you're the one that knows most everything. So one of the big lessons I learned, and one of the struggles that I had back when I had the fitness company was, there would be sometimes days where there'd be 2 or 3 or 4 days where I would not even leave my apartment. I would be sitting at a desk and be on Zooms or phone calls or whatever it was on my computer, and I would never leave my apartment. And it really does take a toll on you to not have the ability to do that. So, one of the big lessons I learned is, find a workspace, or find friends that you can work with, and or fellow entrepreneurs that you can work with, even if you're doing completely different things. Yeah. And you don't interact from a professional perspective, just to be in the same room with that energy, that buzz that people are creating in their projects, I think is one of the biggest things. So in this round of me, I came off of working in an office every day, and I was around dozens of people, and people are constantly coming into my office, and so and then going from that to like sitting at my dining table and doing Zoom and being back on my computer again, it was a challenge that I started to face. And so I've made a very concerted effort this time to make sure that there's days where I go out. I luckily have other friends who have small companies or are entrepreneurs, and we get together and we work in the same space sometimes. Nice. And I think that's something that's really helpful. It helps the psyche, it helps the energy, and that's also part of the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing as a thought partner, because it's someone that you can interact with on a different level as well.
Yeah, I feel you there. I waited far too long to get into any kind of community of entrepreneurs, and it was rough, I tell you. Because sharing your challenges with friends or your husband, or they just don't get it. They just don't get it. If you're in a job, they just do not get it. And it's just like talking to the wall. So I second that. Get into some kind of community. If there's nothing around you, start your own. There's lots though. There's, you can go to meetup.com, whatever. Find some people out there and just get involved. But yeah, and I like what you were saying too about timing. Like sometimes we think being an entrepreneur, it's all about having this crazy new wild idea that's never been thought of before. But sometimes the market just won't tolerate that, right? It's just too new. It's too different. And people get scared of it. So timing, and then being flexible as well, like being able to roll with the punches. I think that's a trait that you need to have as an entrepreneur in order to just keep going. Because, we know that most businesses fail after like a couple of years. Most of them fall off the map. Maybe 5 is the kind of the average, but yeah, to keep going. Like I've been in business for myself for 16 years, and yeah, I've had some evolutions along the way for sure. And you can't be really just super tied to anything. You have to be malleable and flexible.
Yeah, and then I think with the timing thing, you got to keep testing it and seeing, like,
if
the idea is good, which I did. I knew the idea was great, and it was just a little too early. And there's an example that's not me, but I'm very aware of. When I was working at Motorola, I started working there in the year 2000. And as part of the initial part of when I was working there and part of an orientation, they used to have this area of the company called Motorola Labs, where they would do all of these innovative things and, you know, test stuff out. And it was kind of the workshop before it made it out into public. And you know, I remember going in there, and they had something they called it the map phone, and it was a little tablet, and it had little different what we now call apps on it, and it had a little stylus, and you could tap, you know, a map, or you could tap a messaging module, and it was 2000, and they said, you know, we took it around and we took it to all of the cellular carriers, you know, AT&T, and at the time it was Singular, and Verizon, the Bells, all of the different companies, and they were like, nobody would want this. This is, you know, this is crazy. Like, nobody wants this. And then fast forward, you know, whatever, 6, 7, 8 years later, and everybody, you know, has an iPhone, or and which was a more modern version of what I had seen in 2000. So again, it was about timing, and it's about, you know, people's openness and demand, and so I really I think the timing thing is very important, and it's not necessarily, oh, the timing is wrong, give up on your idea. The timing is not quite right yet, but keep following it along, and there'll be a moment when you can strike.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, people like Steve Jobs just were genius at that. Finding and capturing those moments where they could insert their ideas into the market that at a time that, you know, they would accept them. So, but yeah, being part of a group as well would kind of help with that too, because you would get, you know, people's thoughts around your ideas. You can share your ideas, and you know, sometimes it just takes a different perspective in order for you or someone mirroring what you're telling them for you to even see it. It's so strange how that works, right? But definitely, as entrepreneurs, we're thinking about a ton of different things. So we need someone to come in and just kind of untangle that mess in our head sometimes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Well, tell us a little bit. Now, I do want to talk at the end about some other, you know, advice you would have for entrepreneurs, but I want to dig in a little bit to this new business you're starting and these new dots you've connected. The Alavivo for wellness practitioners. Tell us a bit about that and where that idea came from and where you're going with it.
Well, it was a very selfish thing at first.
Okay.
I have an incredible wellness practitioner. She's a chiropractor. She's a craniopathist. She does Reiki. She's a homeopathic doctor, and probably 5 other things I can't remember, rattle off the top of my head. And she's developed a very unique method of the way that she sees her patients or clients, whatever you call them. And when I'm like having my worst pain or something is really off, and I go to her, she just fixes me, and she keeps me really tuned up so that I'm physically, you know, and probably other ways, very optimized. And one day I was driving over for my appointment, and I was really thinking about like what a unique approach she has that she's developed and kind of on her own because of her curiosity into the fields that she works in. And I was like, oh my God, one day she's going to die or she's going to move away, or I'm going to move away, or something is going to happen. She's going to retire or whatever it is. And I was like, what am I going to do? Who's going to fix me up? Who's going to keep me moving? And I got there and I was like, Dr. Danny, one day you're going to die.
Nice.
And she's like, what are you going to talk about? I was like, what's going to happen to everything that you figured out in your life and your career and all of this, you know, adjustments to your methodology and the way you do things. And she's like, you know, I've been kind of thinking about that. And you know, I just, you know, I don't know. And she's like, you know, a couple of people have encouraged me to write a book. And I was like, yeah, but wouldn't it, you know, isn't there a way we could figure out how to like document what you do, and you could train other people and give people some of the magic that you figured out? And And, as I thought about it more and more, I realized that she's not the only one. There's other people I work with across the wellness spectrum that they've done the same thing. They've combined different methodologies together and they've come up with something really powerful. And they're like the only one that does what they do. And I realized there's a way to help work with them, similar to the way I came up with the concept of the way that I work with the clients for the thought partnering. And I said, there's a way that we can work on this and help you out there as well. And as I dug in, I figured out there was 3 different areas where they could be helped. One is taking this knowledge and being able to share it and teach other people and share their life's work with other people so that it really doesn't die with them. And I don't mean that in a morbid sense, but just in, however they end their career, like, pass on the torch to someone else after you've really invested so much into it. The second is creating community, because a lot of wellness practitioners are those solo practitioners, solopreneurs. They go and they really focus on their clients, and they see their clients from the time they start their day till the time they end their day, and they're on their own. And there's a lot of other people around there that they could be interacting with, and those connections don't necessarily happen naturally, as I learned. So it's kind of taking, looking at them as entrepreneurs and ways to be able to connect them to each other and find support and find ways that they can help their clients even more. And the third piece is I found out that a lot of them struggle with kind of the entrepreneur. They're very, very, very good at delivering the healing that they deliver, but they tend not to be the best business people in understanding processes and the infrastructure and scheduling and financial management and all of the things. And that's something that I learned while I was doing the same thing for doctors in the healthcare company that I worked for before. Very talented technicians, practitioners, doctors. However, when it came to how to run a business and how to set up the infrastructure and the processes, that's where they struggled. So very similar to entrepreneurs, a lot of them have really great ideas, and they have the idea, but then they get to a point where they're like, okay, now how do I scale this? How do I take this? How do I make this into something bigger? I've been able to do it locally. I've been able to do it in my neighborhood. I've been able to put in one shop. I've been able to sell one product, but now I don't know how to do it for more than that. So that's, again, where I come in and I want to take that expertise and focus on this particular niche where they're, where I think there's a big benefit, not just to them, but also to the people who are looking for ways where I would say our traditional healthcare system is failing them.
Yeah. And I love how you've, kind of systematized it into these 3 steps that they're, they need help with, that you would take them through to really capture what it is they do for the next generations. Because I agree. Same in my industry. We're really talented at, creative and talented and all that. But the business side, we're just not taught that when we're being trained for our thing, right? So it's hard to know everything. It's hard to know what you don't know when you start a business, and all the little sort of almost side businesses that you're going to have to start too, because you're going to have to do marketing, and you're going to have to do accounting, and you're going to have to do all these little things, and then shift and change. The nice thing is you can shift because you're so agile, because you're just yourself or a small team. So that's the nice thing. But it's like, sometimes it's like, okay, well, what do I shift to? And I know a couple of people who, for example, a lady I know who was an event planner during COVID. She was like, well, what the hell do I do now? Right. So she shifted into doing like a home organization, because you could still get into, for the most part, get into someone's home. So yeah, you have to have that ability to be really nimble and think on your feet, and doing that alone is tough. And just knowing all the ins and outs of the business world is really tough. So I can appreciate what you're doing to help all these practitioners pass the torch, so as it were. In talking with you, I kind of have a feeling of what I think I know your superpower is. And I always love to ask people I'm either hiring or working with in some way, or just I don't know, I guess this is my general like go-to question because I'm just super curious if people even know what it is or have thought about it. But what would you say is your superpower and how does it help you in your business, do you think?
I'm glad you asked this question, and I have a fun answer, I think, for this one.
Okay.
I have a spiritual practice, and I like to try different things out as far as working with these different wellness practitioners, healers. And I went to a guy who's an energetic shaman a year ago, and it was a very unique experience of going through it. But one of the things that he identifies for you is he says, "What is your spiritual species?" And it's kind of an avatar of how you can think about and what characteristics you have. And when I asked him, when he told me this, I was very unfamiliar with the concept. It's something kind of uniquely that he does. He actually looked at me and he said, he's like, "You're a space chameleon." And I was like, "A space chameleon?" And I was like, "What does that even mean?" And he actually described it to me, and he said, like, as a chameleon, what do chameleons do? They go in, they blend in to their surroundings, and they gather information. They observe, they gather information. And I said, okay, that makes sense. And then he's like, "What's the space part?" And he's like, "Well, then once you've gone in and you've gathered the information, all of the information you need to gather, you get in your spaceship and you go up, and now you can take that information armed with that information, you can see the big picture. And you can see how all of it fits together. And like you said, to connect the dots or to see how that information and context can be used." And so I was like, wow, that's like really on point for the way that I approach things. I mean, I've always been a doer when it comes to business. I'm not an academic when it comes to business. I'm somebody that goes in and tries to do something once so that I know enough to be dangerous, and I don't necessarily become an expert, but like I launched a website, and I was like, I'm not a website designer. This is not something I do, but I did it because I wanted to understand what it took, and I wanted to understand how it was done, because then the next time I hire somebody to do it, I know what they're really doing behind the scenes. So that's the chameleon part of it. And one of the things that I think is my superpower is be able to gather all of this information and help people make those connections and connect those dots that they don't normally see. So when it was time for me when I went out on my own again and I had to come up with a name for my LLC, I was just very inspired by this image and this metaphor that he had given me. And he tells these very vivid stories, like to explain what he's seeing in that other world. And so when he described this metaphor, I really latched onto it. And so I call my LLC that I do business under, it's actually called Chameleon Spaceship. So I really embraced it. And I think that's what my superpower is. And I love the way that this metaphor describes for people what it is that I do and what I can do.
Oh, that's so funny. I wonder if he made up that term specifically for you, or if he's used it before, if it's like one of his official terms.
Well, he said he's never seen it before. And he said every time he sees somebody, he sees different things in them and different descriptions. So he said, this was a unique one for him.
Yeah, it's definitely memorable, right? It sticks in the mind, the space chameleon. That's perfect. And that's exactly what I was thinking of you, but not in those colorful words, but I saw the dot connector, but I did not think about the space chameleon. That's hilarious. I think I'll use that in my strategy sessions with clients. It's a lot more memorable. Like, let's pick some words to describe your brand. How about space chameleon? Oh, that's hilarious.
And I think, the idea behind it too, and the idea of kind of looking at the big picture, a more practical description of what my superpower is I can help see the big picture. I can help make the connections, but I don't stop there. Like, a big part of me going in and doing in all of these years, I've had roles in pretty much every business function: finance, marketing, sales, operations, quality, anything you can think of. I've probably done some role in that field. And because I've done enough of these things across the board, I can also take a look and see, like, once we see the big picture, now how do we implement it? And I think that's one of my superpowers as well, is seeing the connection between, okay, I see what needs to be done, but I also know how to do it. or at least how
Yes.
to kind of direct it. And, you know, because I've worked across a lot of industries, the way that I look at that as well is that every industry is basically the same. There's kind of like a top layer on top that's, you know, regulated in different ways. Healthcare is obviously regulated in a certain way. The cannabis industry is regulated in a certain way. You know, fitness and wellness has its own kind of set of rules. And as you look across these different industries, if you peel back that upper layer, underneath the hood, the engines are pretty much the same. It's just a different body, if you think of it in that term of an analogy, and that specific industry specific knowledge, the entrepreneurs that I work with, they're in that industry and they're in that company because they have such deep knowledge of that industry. So when I work with them, I rely on them to tell me all of the industry specific things that they need to know. But then we really get into, you know, we lift up the hood and we work on the engine, and they have to tell me just some of the little things that I need to know. But ultimately, that's how I can take and marry the strategy anywhere and really look at the operations. And every once in a while we run into a roadblock, oh, we can't do that in this industry, but then we can figure out a workaround together.
Yeah, having that brain where you can just systematize things and at least have that starting point, that is super helpful when you're an entrepreneur. And I think you also mentioned before about doing things yourself, like when you built your own website and all that. And I'm a huge proponent of that too. It's like whether you're hiring someone to do ads for you or you're branding even, I always suggest like do something for yourself, like do it yourself first, or even automating things. Don't just automate everything to start, because you're not going to know what's working and what's not working and how to tweak things if everything's automated. So do it yourself first, get a general understanding of what is going on. And that way, well, A, you know, you're not getting ripped off when you're actually hiring that expert, right? Because that unfortunately does happen. And B, you can direct them better. You kind of know, you have a better understanding of what they're doing, like you said, and you can give better and more clear direction, and you just become a better client that way. So I totally agree with those things you've said. Well, I think we're at a good point to just talk about some advice you would have. And I think we hit on a few things here. But I do like to leave my listeners with some practical tips they can take just from whoever I'm talking to in their area of expertise. I want to, you know, just like what you're doing with Ali Vivo and sort of making this collection of knowledge available for future generations. I would love this podcast to be that too, in gathering, you know, just some tidbits that people can walk away with and think about, apply to their own business, and just help them, you know, make it a little bit better. So what would you say, what's like your maybe top 3 pieces of advice that you would have for an entrepreneur? What kind of lessons have you learned along the way that you'd love to pass along?
Well, I mentioned this to you before we even started, but and this is always something that shocks people a little bit when I say it. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking of starting a business, my first piece of advice is don't do it.
Yeah, that was surprising. Yeah.
and people are really surprised when I say it. And for me, it's really, you know, as the chameleon, as the observer, I always look at how they respond to it. And some people say, oh, really? Like, I shouldn't do it? Why not? Like, and there's other people that are like, what are you talking about? I'm already doing it, right? Like, I'm already in this life. The reason I say don't do it is because it's very hard. Being an entrepreneur is very hard. There's a lot of things that you don't know that you're going to encounter. And I can't even imagine to tell you, because everyone's journey is a little bit different, and the issues that you face are going to be a little bit different based on a number of different factors and circumstances. So I always say, like, if you're not 100% committed to what you're doing and what you're working on, don't do it. Like, it really does overtake you. And if you really are passionate about what you do and you really love what you do and you're ready to go in and do what needs to get done and learn how to problem solve and learn how to get through the obstacles that you absolutely will face, and you have the grit for it, then do it. But But I always want to stop people in their tracks and really get them to think about, is this right for me? Because it's not an easy journey, but it can also be a very exciting journey and a very fulfilling journey. And I remember if I said this at the beginning, but I always look for the lessons in everything. I feel like every encounter that you have, every little iteration of what you're doing and what you try has a lesson in it. It's either like, yes, do more of this, or do less of this, or wait, like the timing piece of it that we talked about already. So for me, like, it's really being aware of the lessons that are being tendered to you, even in the most difficult moments that you're going through as an entrepreneur. There's something there. I think a second thing is understanding your purpose and understanding your brand. And your personal brand might be different from the brand of what you're creating. But what are you trying to achieve, and how are you living the brand? It's not just, when I talk about brand, I'm not talking about graphic design and colors and logos. I mean, they represent something, of course, but it's actually what they represent and how you live that out that's just as important. And in fact, I'm working with one of my clients right now on both looking at what is the brand of the company and what is the brand of the individuals who are the founders of the company, and how do they actually mesh together in different ways. And it can be really good if you're very conscious of it, and really powerful in the way that you communicate out with the world, and especially as you scale and grow. And I think the third big piece of advice I would say is seek advice. Don't be afraid. I think a lot of people also feel like, I have to figure this out on my own. I'm doing this. I took this leap. Like, I have to do everything myself. Like, it's my idea. And there's a lot of pride in that. But, let a little bit of that go, and seek some advice. Seek somebody to be your partner in problem solving. It makes a big difference. Having started my career working in a big company as an entrepreneur, as I had said, there's something really beautiful about, you're sitting at your desk, you're working on something, you're like, do I do A or B? Or I'm really stuck on this. And you can literally get up from your desk, you can walk 5 feet, 50 feet, across the cafeteria, and you can say, hey, I know this is what you do. I've been thinking about this. What do you think of A, and what do you think about B? And you can work through it with somebody. And then 5 minutes later, you can be back at your desk, continuing on with what you're doing. When you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're sitting at your kitchen table working, you can't get up and walk 5 feet and ask, a subject matter expert that. And so sometimes you're like, well, I guess I just have to figure it out on my own, or I just have to work through it. And it's not something I know. And maybe you Google it, or maybe you ChatGPT it, or whatever it is these days. But there's something to be said about being able to talk through it with somebody else. And this is exactly why I got into what I'm doing right now, because some of the people around me were going through these things and looking for problem solving. And I'm very grateful that they thought of me as somebody that could help them work through it. And that's really what it was. And it's like, okay, if you have that person on speed dial and you run into these issues, or you're running out of motivation, or you can't seem to solve a problem, or you're this close to the finish line and there's one more thing you have to do and you just don't know what it is. Like, those are the types of things that if you just can get up and walk to that desk around the corner, which you have the luxury of doing in a big company, but you can do that in a virtual sense. Those are the things that I think make the biggest difference. And I know there were some times where it was pride and ego when I was starting my company, where I was like, well, I'm here. And I know a lot of people. I have a great network of people across everything. And sometimes I was just too stubborn for my own to just say, like, I'm just going to figure this out myself, because I got myself into this. I'm going to get myself out of this. And it doesn't need to be that way. So, I think that's a really important advice. And I hope somebody hears that and says, the next time I get into that situation, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call, whatever.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like, for me, before I ever hired business coaches, or maybe even in between coaches, it doesn't always have to be a paid engagement too. It could be just two entrepreneurs, whatever, even if it's different fields or it's the same field, just getting together. I would get together with this lady every Friday, and we would just kind of chew the fat. What's going on with you? What's going on with you? Okay, well, let's think about this. Kind of have like this mini mastermind. And it was so helpful. And it was even helpful in uncovering like something about myself that was really a limiting belief that I had that she identified. Oh, I keep getting notifications that she helped me identify. And I was like, huh, I didn't know that about myself. Maybe you're right, kind of thing. So it definitely helps. And it doesn't always have to be somebody hired. Like if you're just starting out, just find somebody in your area or whatever. If you've taken a course, like I met her through a branding certification course that I took, and we just connected and we stayed in touch, and it was so helpful to just have that second brain in the room.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think, as you said, there's many different forms this can take, and over
Yeah.
the course of my time doing this, like there's the SBA. A lot of times in different, especially in metropolitan areas, they have these clinics that you can go to and talk to a business coach
Yeah.
for free, and they can offer you advice. These are people that volunteer that are usually in the sunset part of their career and have done a lot of things as well. So I've done that. I've taken advantage of that service that's been offered. Similar to you, I had a friend when I was still living in Chicago and starting this company, and he pulled together 5 of us and created this small mastermind group. And once a month we would get together and we'd have coffee all together and kind of talk about what was going on in our businesses and our lives, and just kind of give each other advice. I did something more formal. It was kind of an offshoot of one of these kind of like executive groups that they put together. But I found one that was specifically for entrepreneurs, specifically for startup founders. So I was a part of that group for a couple of years. I made some really great connections and learned a problem-solving framework through there. And then the individual, like the coaches and the consultants, and what I'm calling a thought partner, but I've had people who have been thought partners in the past, and the really good ones, will sit and work with you and help you problem solve. But then also, like, when they get to a point where it's like, okay, this is beyond my expertise, but I know somebody, and let's phone a friend and figure this out now. When we phone a friend, those are the ones that I think also have been extremely valuable. So it's the ones that can help you through 80 or 90% of it, but then that last little bit, they've got a Rolodex or a contact list for those who are younger of people that they can connect with that are subject matter experts in something that's needed more specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't have this, get out and do it right now. I think even in Donald Miller's latest book about marketing, he talks about, if you're a coach or something, go start a coaching group where you guys get together, because not only will you, like, iron sharpens iron, but you're creating really a referral network for yourself and for everybody else, right? And you become all that more valuable to not only them, but your clients, because you know a guy who knows a guy, right? And so
exactly. And once you've been in the trenches together, it creates these connections for life.
Yeah.
And for me, connection is very important. And I love making connections between people. I love making connections between businesses. I love making connections between industries. I love making connections between ideas, concepts. So for me, connection is such an important part of what I do. And that's why I call it partnering, because, partnering is really making a connection. So that's another big piece of what drives me.
Absolutely. So go do it. You heard it here first. All right, Jeff. Well, it's been so great talking to you and getting to know you a bit better. I've known you for 5 years now, but I had never knew some of these stories that you brought forth today. So thanks for sharing. Where can people find you and support you and connect with you?
My website for my thought partnering is thoughtpartner.pro. And on that website, you can schedule a free 1-hour consultation with me. I actually really love talking to people who are doing interesting things across any industry, and especially if it's new, innovative ideas. And even in that hour, I always try to make sure that the person I'm talking to leaves with at least a couple of new thoughts or ideas or things they hadn't really thought about before in the way that it is. And whether or not we end up working together in a formal capacity, people who are doing exciting things in the world, I always love to be able to support. So, I would love to meet people there. And in the very near future, there will be a landing page up of Alavivo, the wellness part of the network. It's not up yet, but it should be within the next couple of weeks, at least the initial page, to get people to sign up and learn more, and as it unfolds, to be able to offer more things to that community and that particular industry and niche, which I think is so greatly needed to connect the practitioners together, but also to help people find alternative methods of feeling more alive.
Awesome. Yes. And I'm super excited personally because I'm doing the logo for that one. So I'm excited to see it come to life. Yeah. Coming soon to the interwebs near you. You're also on LinkedIn, which I know we're connected there. So if you're on LinkedIn, go find Jeff on LinkedIn. Jeff Marinucci, just search that up and you'll find him. He's wearing a lovely green sweater. And thank you so much, Jeff, for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Angela, for having me. I really enjoyed the chat, and I hope the people who are listening had one or two little nuggets that'll be helpful in their journeys as well.
I think so. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everyone. We'll see you next